My name is Andrea Patton, and I work for the City of Boston Disabilities Commission. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made by Boston City TV, a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications, and is being broadcast on Xfinity Channel 26, RCN Channel 13, BIOS Channel 962, and on YouTube. With that, I'll hand it over to our board chair, Wes Ireland.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you, Andrea, so much. This is Wes here signing. Good evening to all of you as well. I'm just going to get us hit the ground running with our meeting agenda. We will begin, of course, with introductions. I will ask each of the board members to please introduce yourselves, speak to your role, as well as which region of the City of Boston you live in, and a visual description of yourselves as well, please. I can go first. My name is Wes Ireland, and I am the board chair, and I live in the North End of Boston. I am a white male, and I am using sign language, so you will hear two female sign language interpreters interpreting what I say in sign language into English throughout the course of this meeting. And I will now call on each of the board members as I see you on my screen to introduce yourselves. Carl, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Carl Richardson. I live in Brighton. I identify as a deafblind individual in that I have a dual sensory loss of hearing and vision. I am a white, middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, and I think I'm wearing a blue shirt, blue button-down dress shirt.
Great, thanks so much, Carl. Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Charlie Kemp. I am a resident of the North End. I'm on the advisory board representing parents and caregivers of children with disabilities. I am a Korean American with black hair, started getting gray hair, so there's some in there. I wear glasses, and I guess strikingly no other distinctive features, I guess. So that's me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Olivia, would you go next, please?
Sure, my name is Olivia Richard. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair, and I'm wearing a Boston Fire Department hoodie. And I represent Brighton.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Paul, would you mind going next, please?
My name is Paul Karen. I serve as the board's vice chairman. It's an honor and privilege to serve. I work at the Boston Planning Department as a supervisor. I also serve as a labor foreman in Laborers Local 151, the oldest laborers local in New England. I'm wearing a blue pullover. I'm a Caucasian male with graying hair, and I serve as an advocate for mental health. I have members of my family with mental health. Thank you. I live in the West End.
Thanks very much, Paul.
You're welcome.
Richard, would you go next, please?
Sure, thanks, Wes. Richard Gillespie, live in Back Bay, member of the commission. I've kids' mental health. That's been a big issue in my years, and I also am hearing impaired, and I live in Back Bay. And I missed the introduction, Wes. Apologies if I left out any. Oh, I'm wearing a gray. I have more gray hair than Paul, and I'm wearing a sport jacket and white shirt.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Richard. Paulette, would you go next, please?
evening, I'm Paulette Perez. I'm an older black woman with gray hair wearing a blue shirt and a black sweater, and I live in Mattapan, Mass, and I'm a board member.
Thanks, Paulette. Andrea, can you go ahead, please?
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm wearing a black multicolored shirt and a yellow sweater and glasses. I'm a staff member for the Disabilities Commission.
This is Wes. I apologize. I think the interpreter may have misunderstood actually what I spelled. I was asking for
Additional board members?
Tara. Tara, thank you so much. That was an interpreter error. I apologize. Tara, go ahead.
Thanks, Wes. Hi, everyone. I am Tara Southard. I am a middle-aged white woman with glasses and a pink t-shirt. I am a board member, and I live on the Jamaica Plain and Roxbury line.
Thanks, Tara. I see Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Jean Clower. I live in Dorchester and am a board member. I am an older white Caucasian female with more salt than pepper of my gray hair. A blue and white shirt, and I wear purple glasses. I think that, oh, and I am a power wheelchair user. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I think that's all the board members that I currently see on screen. So I would like to ask Commissioner McCosh, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Wes. Hi, everybody. I'm Krista McCosh. I'm the Disability Commissioner and ADA Title II Coordinator for the City of Boston. And I will turn it back to Wes. Oh, I'm sorry. I am a female, middle-aged with blonde hair and glasses, and I'm sitting in front of an image of Boston City Hall.
This is Wes. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. I just realized Juan Carlos is with us, and you raised your hand. Thank you so much. I didn't see you earlier. I've got 2 pages of people, and so I didn't have you right in front of me. I apologize. Juan Carlos, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone, and not a problem at all, Wes. Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Ramirez. I'm Hispanic male, living in Boston South End, commission member as well. I'm wearing a blue shirt. Native from Peru. I have a spinal cord injury, so I use a wheelchair for my mobility.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Juan Carlos, for that. Double checking, triple checking, just to make sure I haven't missed any other board members for introductions. Okay, I think that's everybody. All right, and I'm getting a nod about that. That's great. Thank you very much, all of you, for introducing yourselves. We can go ahead with our agenda for this evening, which I will just pull up now. Okay, the first item we have to discuss is approval of our previous meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments, concerns, questions, objections about the meetings from our last board meeting? Excuse me, the minutes from our last board meeting. Okay. Would someone make a motion then to approve the board meeting minutes as written?
Paul. I make a motion to approve.
This is Carl, I second.
That's great. Carl, thank you. Paul has made the motion. Carl has made the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, the board meeting minutes from last month are approved as read. Thank you very much. Let's see what is next on our agenda. Okay, so today we have the bus stop management presentation. And we have two presenters with us. We appreciate your time. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chair, thank you for recognizing me, and thank you to the Disabilities Commission for having us. My name is Matt Moran. I work for the City of Boston Transportation Department. I'm a white male wearing a gray plaid color button-down shirt and sitting in my office at City Hall. So again, thank you for having us, and it's great to be here. So we're going to be talking with you about some work that we've been working on for the last few months to really think through the City of Boston's strategy and management around bus stops. We're going to be talking a little bit more about this, but there are nearly 2,000 bus stops in the City of Boston, and we want to think through a way that we can create a comprehensive and orderly management structure to ensure that everyone has fair and equal access to bus stops, and to make sure that we are using these assets and these transportation these transportation points as best as we can. So I'm going to hand it over to Lee Anderson, who is a co-op from Northeastern University, who's been working with my team since the beginning of July, who's going to give a presentation about bus stops and really what we are trying to do in terms of managing them and managing them better. So with that said, Lee.
Hi everyone, thank you all for your time today. My name is Lee Anderson. I use they, them pronouns, so I'm a white, non-binary person with short hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a beige and white button-up shirt that is very soft. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for those of us that are able to see that. So, as Matt said, we are here today to talk about better bus stops for Boston. And I just wanted to emphasize that we are going to be speaking more so about how bus stops are managed than how they are, than their design. So, a brief introduction to our team first. And then we're going to have a conversation about what we mean by bus stops, what the goal for our bus stops are, why we have that goal, what our research task is, what we found, and then what's next. So, project team, I've introduced myself, Matt has introduced himself. We also have Gina on this call today. She is an intern with Nelson Nygaard, and we also have a wonderful consultant, Tim, who's been helping us. They are fantastic. So now, what do we mean by a bus stop? In this image, it's downtown by Haymarket. There's a lot of different signs going on. We have some signs to 93, and there's someone riding their bike in a bike bus lane. What we mean by bus stops are the designated area where bus riders wait to board the bus. We're not talking exclusively about bus stations, like Ruggles or North Station. Bus stops encompass both the larger bus stations and smaller, less identifiable stops, like the ones with just a pole on the sidewalk. So today we're focusing on bus stop management. And then there's a photo of a NACTO bus stop that's got a shelter and bikes and green infrastructure and a light. A bus stop includes curb configuration, pavement markings, sidewalk accessibility and clear path of travel, bus stop signage, amenities such as benches and shelters and green infrastructure. And so signage and all of those amenities in a street are also called street furniture. So what is our goal? Our goal here is to have the best bus stops in the United States eventually and set a precedent for other cities so that they can invest in the future of their bus stops, improving transit experiences for Boston and also beyond Boston. Why we have this goal? Buses are used by a lot of people in the city of Boston. Bus stops serve over 300,000 people daily in the MBTA network on average, and more than half of those people are riding in Boston. Additionally, even more people use these stops to ride link bus services, ride share vehicles and public and private shuttles. And here I have a photo of Back Bay's Logan Express to the airport. Also a side note that I forgot to add, all of these photos are photos that I took walking around the city of Boston in an attempt to capture what the state of bus stops was in Boston today, or last week, but you get the point. Bus stops are also an equity issue. Of all MBTA riders, bus riders are most likely to be dependent on transit, and they're also most likely to be members of vulnerable and historically underserved populations. So here we have on the right a photo of the bus stop at Heinz Convention Center right by TJ Maxx. It's a very narrow street, and there's someone that's walking in the street because there is not enough room on the sidewalk. We have underinvested in bus stops. Though corridor reconstructions and development projects can provide really good opportunities for bus stop improvement, a lot of stops outside of those projects lack adequate attention and investment. This means that many bus stops aren't accessible, or they're poorly located or poorly maintained. And so here we have a bus stop outside of the Prudential Station. It's not the best situation. It's definitely more accessible than some bus stops, but it's really not the optimal location, and there's nowhere to sit. You can see there's someone leaning against a pole instead of having somewhere to sit, and there's one tree, but it looks a little shabby. So as Matt said, there are almost 2,000 bus stops in the city of Boston, and 85% of the 2,000 do not have shelters right now. So we have really underinvested in providing a safe shelter for people waiting for the bus. And then here's just kind of a map view. The first image I showed was all of the different bus stops in the city of Boston. There's a bunch of green dots that you can see lining all of the streets. And then very, very, very many less shelters, a lot of which concentrated along major transit corridors such as Washington Street and over by Kenmore on the edge of the city of Brookline. And then this map shows all of the different walk sheds. So the darker green is much more sparse, and a lot of the stops are concentrated in the center of the city and not so much down south. So in addition to being an equity issue, they're an accessibility issue. Since beginning improvements in 2019, the MBTA still hasn't received funding to redesign 64% of 600 bus stops in their network that they identified as having significant barriers to access. Here's that Haymarket station again. You see someone pushing a mobility device on a brick sidewalk, which is not optimal. So what was our research task? Why were we doing this project? What is the work that we've been doing? Our goal was to summarize the existing condition and operations in kind of the bus stop universe, outlining future goals for the operations, and then providing an outline for a new bus stop manager role within the BTD transit team, for Boston Transportation Department, work plan, creating kind of opportunities for future bus stop programs for this potential employee. So on the screen now, we have a whole long list of the different people that we've spoken to for this project. We have done over 25 stakeholder interviews with 4 peer cities and 5 monthly working group meetings with key agency stakeholders. So some of the sampling of the people we've spoken to, a lot of the people within the streets cabinet, so including active transportation, a lot of people across the city of Boston, like Age Strong, the Disabilities Commission, Office of Green Infrastructure. We've talked to people from the MBTA. We've talked to some advocacy groups like RTAG, Transit Matters. Some additional relevant stakeholders we've spoken to include JCDecaux, which is who we have a contract with for shelters. And then our peer cities we've spoken to are Chicago, London, Minneapolis, and New York City. And what did we find? We found that every stakeholder we spoke to observed a lack of consistent coordination and ad hoc / reactionary decision-making around bus stop management. Non-standardized processes lead to inconsistent outcomes. These two bus stops on the screen are across the street from each other, yet they have very different amenities and provide a very different experience for users. The stop on the top picture has a widened path for pedestrians, a separated bike lane, a real-time arrival screen, and a large shelter, whereas the stop in the lower photo has a narrow sidewalk and shared bus-bike lane. And also the text on the screen, the top text is the font that the bottom text usually is. Trying to be a little silly there. And standardized processes lead to consistent outcomes. While there is no one-size-fits-all for bus stops, the lack of standardization that we have in the city means that riders are not guaranteed a safe, accessible, or dignified experience. We want to change that. There's an equitable investment in and attention towards bus stops. Our lack of consistent policy leads to inequitable outcomes, particularly in communities that have been underserved historically by the city. And that decentralized responsibility results in missed opportunities and less implementation as a result. Because we don't have one point person for bus stops, there isn't consistent and concentrated attention going towards the improvement of all bus stops, and that's not fair. Investing in a bus stop manager makes a lot of sense. Our stakeholders agree that the city of Boston would greatly benefit from this program and this person. A full-time employee could create standard policy and design guidelines. They could strengthen interagency coordination. They could centralize responsibility, ensuring an equitable distribution of investments in bus stops, and set a precedent for other cities, helping Boston to create the best bus stops in the United States. So what's next? What are we asking for you? Our next goal is to develop a work plan for and secure funding for one full-time bus stop manager by 2025. Our ask to you is to help us highlight the value that this role could bring to the city of Boston by sharing how it would impact you and our community. And some additional questions we have for feedback are what questions you still have about the bus stop program, what bus stops mean to you, if there are any more that we should document. A lot of the bus stops that I have shown in photos are more downtown Boston, so if there's specifically ones that you take or that you know that are terrible, I'm happy to take more photos. And who should we speak to about bus stops? So thank you.
Okay, great. Wesley speaking here. So, yes, thank you for bringing down the slides for me. Great. Okay, thanks a lot. Now, Lee and Matt, so I'll open the floor for any questions if anyone from the audience or the board chairs have any, board members have any questions that they'd like to ask, maybe get your feedback. Yeah, Charlie. And then Juan Carlos after.
Thank you, Chair West. Thank you for the presentation. It's actually very interesting. I didn't realize, and while you were presenting, I kind of looked up some of the numbers of actual commuters that are coming into Boston and all that. That number of 318,000 is very significant. And in comparison to how many are actually coming in from outside of Boston to inside of Boston commuting, which is it is a large number, and I agree with that. I do appreciate the presentation, and I think this is the first time that I'm hearing when you stated that there is decentralized management of stops, and that I guess the infrastructure is not consistent, which I appreciate you showing that. So in your advocacy or asking for advocacy for a budget for one person, when you're is something going to happen with the existing systems or the existing, number of folks that are involved with this? If you have a full-time hire, is that going to be a net zero gain, meaning there's going to be consolidation of these roles and responsibilities? Or are you asking for an additional individual on top of all the others that are not actually coordinating and seeming that what it seems like from a presentation that they are collaborating amongst each other?
Yeah, so really good question, Charlie. So I think if I can maybe just try to, if I can start from a place of, we have a number of different teams across the city that are working on bus stops, right? So it's within City Hall, you have property management that maintains the shelters, you have some elements of public works that maintain sanitation near bus stops, trash bins, and do some snow plow and snow removal. You have organizations like my department, BTD, that maintains the pavement markings. You have the MBTA that maintains the signs. But there's really no one person or organization whose responsibility it is to maintain sort of the ecosystem of bus stops, right? So what that means is that frequently things fall through the cracks. So if you think about things like snow clearance, a lot of times that's the responsibility of the property owner next door. Sometimes it's the responsibility of the MBTA, but there's no one person who's overseeing that from a system-wide perspective. If we think about things like the shelters, sometimes the shelters aren't placed in the most advantageous spot from an accessibility standpoint or from a operation standpoint. And so we started to calculate the amount of hours that we as a team spend on bus stops. And we're looking at somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 hours just on the transit team, which is 7 people, but still that is the equivalent of one staffer. And then we start to add in these other teams that are working on bus stops, and you can see that those hours start to add up. So ideally, this person would be a convener, they would be a point person, they would be a resource, and they would also help to facilitate conversations, around what maintenance we should be prioritizing. Is it snow clearance? Is it thinking about enforcement? And then furthermore on design. So as we start to think through what are the design needs of the system, are there certain things that we can be prioritizing as we start to build out more bus stops? When we touch a street, when we rebuild a street, that's our opportunity, right? And so what are the amenities, what are the design criteria that we should be considering? We haven't gotten there yet, but those are a few things.
Thank you.
This is Wes. Juan Carlos, I believe you also had a question or comment. You can go ahead.
Oh, yes, very briefly. Thank you so much, Matt and Lee, for this presentation. I understand a lot of things are very, it's a large organization to take care of. It's pretty hard, it's pretty tough and demanding. I'm wondering more towards the, I guess, sometimes not just the infrastructure that perhaps people with disabilities need, but it's also like a culture shift about how we allow people with disabilities as well probably place themselves better to be visible for drivers so they can come and help them board the bus. I think that's one of the feedback I just want to share, because I think that's very hard, especially when it's peak hours, everyone wants to board the bus really quick. The bus driver operator, they may be very willing to help you to get in, but if everyone already is inside the bus, they cannot deploy the ramp. I guess there is no infrastructure that could solve that problem. So there is also like the cultural, I guess, shift or the communication that needs to be relied to civilians as well, so that everyone can collaborate, towards the same goal. So I'm wondering if you have additional perspectives you can share on that matter, and if there is any kind of assessment towards that end from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Juan Carlos. Really good question. I appreciate that feedback as well. So maybe just taking a step back. So as we think about who operates buses right in Boston, so we have obviously the city of Boston operates all of the curbs, we maintain the streets, but it's obviously the MBTA that then runs the buses, along with some private shuttle providers, along with Boston Public Schools, along with some publicly accessible shuttle buses. So, but the majority of the folks we deal with, I think to your point, and I think to the point you were speaking to, are within the MBTA. And so the role that we can play is we can start to think through maintenance and design of our streets, and sort of we have direct control over that as the city of Boston. But then the second thing we can do is we can coordinate with our partners at the MBTA. And so as we think about that coordination, we can flag issues like this for them. So we do this already. We have a regular coordination and checking with the MBTA around bus service, around bus operations, around bus reliability. And I think to your point, this is certainly something that we'll flag for that conversation. And I know, don't want to speak for the Disabilities Commission staff, but I know they also have really good working relations with the MBTA, the System-Wide Accessibility Office too. So we'll make sure we flag that issue and start thinking through that operational and then also that cultural shift as well.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.
This is Andrea. Just since you mentioned the commission, I'd say Juan Carlos, if there are any specific bus stops where you find that you're consistently like not in a visible location to the bus drivers, there's a little bit of infrastructure stuff we can do with that in terms of like where we put the shelter related to the curb. So if there's any particular ones that come to mind that you're often not visible, let us know. Lee can document them, and then we can always follow up with a conversation about what's us and what's the T. Sorry to step in on the presentation, Matt and Wes.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and thanks, Andrea. That was a great addition too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Wes speaking. Richard, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Hey, Wes, first of all, Lee, I think I heard Matt say you were an intern, and I just want to say that was a very good report. Succinct, to the point. You've got a future someplace, and thank you for that. And I guess maybe this question goes to Matt, but good grief, when you hear about this stuff, you wonder how to get to this point. And I don't want to ask you to point fingers, but is there anybody who's really in charge, or is this really multiple entities, governmental or others, that need to be coordinated and appealed to and cajoled? And is that the context we're in here, which I don't envy you having to deal with?
Thanks for that question. So I think to your point, as traffic, as pickup drop-off, as sort of the Uber and Lyft, the Grubhubs of the world have sort of proliferated across the city. FedEx deliveries, UPS deliveries were always there, but with packaging getting dropped off in greater numbers, we're starting to see bus stops getting blocked more and more. So some of this is an enforcement issue, but some of it is also a design, a maintenance, and I think not to steal a term from Juan Carlos, but a culture shift issue. And so I think this is something that we've known about for a while, that bus stops have been underinvested in, that there hasn't been that attention paid to them from government that there should be. But then it's also, I think the facts on the ground have shifted, especially over the last 5-6 years. And I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of those things with the rise in e-commerce and a lot of deliveries. So to an extent, I think we are now recognizing that, and we as the city are thinking about ways that we can address that. And so we have a mobility team that does curbside delivery and curbside regulation issues, but this sort of feels like something special and unique, and that's why we're working on ways to address that issue.
This is Lee speaking. I can also add that I think in terms of talking to the peer cities, the culture shift that Juan is talking about is definitely apparent. Just there's a very reactionary means that we deal with bus stops in the city, kind of like mitigating harm instead of trying to prevent that. And so by focusing on it more and having one person be in charge of that, That's kind of where we're hoping to be, is in the trajectory of things, is to be less reactionary and more proactive.
This is Wes. Any other questions from board members for Lee or Matt? Okay, I actually have a question. This is Wes again. I had a thought I wanted to share. Is your department responsible for real-time tracking of buses as well?
No, so that would be the MBTA. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we coordinate frequently with the MBTA, and we can certainly pass along a concern to them if there is one. But there's not to get too far in the weeds, but within the MBTA, there's a customer technology department. They're the ones who send out what the feed is, and then different app companies, mostly private app companies, pick up that feed and will then transmit it to you via a tracking app.
Okay. Yeah, the last time I actually used a bus, I was using Google Maps for real-time tracking to see when it would arrive and how late it was or whatever. I think people are still using that currently, so it's interesting. Okay. Not seeing any other questions. Any other thoughts, last questions or thoughts from the board members for Matt or Lee? If not, I will say thank you so much to both of you for your time and your presentation. We appreciate it. Thanks very much.
There was one note in the chat from Tara saying, I echo Juan Carlos at not being seen as a wheelchair user at many stops, especially during peak times. For this reason, I prefer the train first. That's super fair. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks so much again. Have a good evening. Okay, before we move on the agenda, I'm just reading the chat. Feel free, as Andrea said, to follow up with the commission or the commissioner by email, disability@mass.gov. If you wanted to share any further specifics about bus stops or other thoughts that you may have that you would like to be passed along to Lee and Matt for their continued work on this issue. Now I'm just gonna pull up the agenda. Bear with me 1 second. So now in our agenda, it's time for the chair's report. Bear with me again 1 second while I pull that up as well. I have four things that I wanted to share this evening. The first thing is sports related, sports news. Achilles Boston's, the Boston chapter of Achilles had a fundraiser event earlier this month, and the event included watching a hockey game with the retired Bruins player Zdeno Chara. And it was a successful event. Many of you may remember this organization's chapter lead, Joe Lamar, having come to one of our meetings and having given a presentation about their work of transforming people with disabilities to be able to participate in athletic programs and have social connections, such as run meetups and training for marathons and things like that. So that was my first item. The second thing that I wanted to discuss was hurricane preparation, hurricane preparedness. There was a recent article about using the examples of the two recent hurricanes in the American South, Helene and Milton, using them to spotlight the challenges disabled people face when natural disasters occur. Unfortunately, in general, disaster response does not include or consider disabled people, people with disabilities, and they are usually left behind in planning and then literally and physically left behind in evacuations. And they are 2 to 4 times more likely to die or sustain critical injuries during a disaster. Access issues are common in emergency shelters, including insufficient signage for blind and low vision persons, lack of ramps and accessible bathrooms, and a lack of training and awareness among staff and volunteers. So in light of these systemic shortcomings, disaster planning that puts disabled people's lives at risk are persistent at every level in current emergency management systems. When the International Association of Emergency Managers surveyed their members on accessibility of their response systems, almost 50% said that they did not believe those systems effectively met the needs of people with disabilities. In general, governmental programs must engage with disabled people who have subject matter expertise and lived experience to reorganize current systems to make them more inclusive and sustainable. After having learned about this article, I hope that the Disability Commission will continue their work with the City of Boston to prepare for natural disasters, intersectional challenges. Thirdly, for my report this evening, Christopher Reeve, the actor, passed away 20 years ago this month. And there's a new documentary film about his life and what happened when he became quadriplegic after a freak horse riding accident. The name of the documentary is Super/Man, so Superman, but with a slash between super and man. And it is about continuing forward with the drive and spirit that Christopher Reeve modeled and instilled in us all. And the documentary leads to important discussions about disability. One board member, Richard, actually had suggested that we have a private screening of this film for the entire advisory board at City Hall. And I will be sending out a doodle survey to everyone soon to figure out the best times for all of us to get together and watch this documentary and discuss our perspectives and thoughts on the film. One question I had for the board was whether city employees should be invited for the screening. And we can discuss this further at the end of my report. The last thing I wanted to mention is that the 2024 election is now 6 days away, 6 days until Election Day. The mail-in votes deadline was yesterday at 5 p.m. So there is still plenty of time to drop off your ballots at your neighborhood ballot boxes. And I hope that everyone either has voted or plans to vote in the upcoming days. So that concludes my report. I am now open for questions or comments. Wow, okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I guess we're all set. We can move on in our agenda to what is next, which I believe is the Commissioner's report. Bear with me just 1 second to confirm. Yes, Commissioner McCosh, the floor is yours. We'll have your report next.
Great, thank you, Wes. And I know that Andrea's going to share my slide deck. All righty.
Sorry, Commissioner, one sec. Okay, let me try this again.
All right, so I'm going to start off with some department updates. Last month, we told you about Civic Engagement Day. It was scheduled for just a few days after our last board meeting in September. So just to update you, we had 150 plus residents come to the morning event. If you remember, we split it up into two events this year, a morning event and an evening event. The morning event was populated heavily by Boston Public Schools students, transition age students in special education, ages 18 to 22. We had 6 schools attend, and it was really great to see the students. Some signed up to vote, some tried the mock voting process with filling out a ballot and putting it in the machine. They got to learn about joining a board or a commission. They got to hear from different city departments about what work they do, how they could get involved in civic activities. We also had some members of the community attend in the morning and the evening, and some board members. I know I saw Charlie there at the morning session, and Wes and Carl, and I'm sorry if I'm missing other people. I thought Paul and Juan Carlos may have come also. I was a little bit busy running back and forth, but I want to thank everybody who attended. Also, last month I talked about our ADA Day, our ADA transition plan. This is an update to the city's original plan from 1993, which assessed all its facilities for ADA compliance and general access to see if they were not compliant, how they would make a plan to become compliant. So we're currently working with a consultant, a disability consultant, to gather existing City of Boston data sets that contain information on accessibility in public buildings. So currently we're getting data from the Public Facilities Department, who recently undertook a full facilities compliance assessment for all their public buildings. This includes libraries, BCYF centers, municipal buildings like City Hall, and other office buildings that the city owns. So they just, they're wrapping up that complete facilities assessment, facilities condition assessment, FCA. We're also getting data from the Parks and Rec Department on accessibility in parks, the Streets Cabinet to look at access on sidewalks, what data they have regarding that, and curb ramps. Boston Public Schools also did a thorough facilities condition assessment on all their schools. So we're going to take all that data and we're going to funnel it into a web page on boston.gov that will give a broad overview, a quick look at the accessibility status of buildings and parks and things like that. And then we'll have clicks to links with more detailed information on accessibility. So for example, in a Boston Public School, we have very detailed data on the accessibility conditions of a particular school. Say it's the Horace Mann, the new school that they just opened up. And it will give very detailed information on like slopes and ramps, elevators, all those things. But it will also we want to provide a broad overview. So say you vote in that school, you'll know if you can get in the front door, you'll know if there's a bathroom, and you'll know if it provides a basic level of access. So it's an exciting project we're looking forward to, and stay tuned for more details. We're also working with a group of students. I agree that Lee did a great job with the bus stop research that they did. But we are also working with a group of students from Northeastern University. They're researching what peer cities do when they have people with disabilities who need case management. It's an issue that comes up in our office frequently. People will call and they may need services for a relative who's older or disabled. And if they are older, we can refer them to Age Strong. But if they're a younger person with disabilities, there's really no place we can refer them that will take on like case management of comprehensive needs. So if they need housing and home care and transportation, we can direct people to different organizations that cover those things. But there isn't really one place that we can say, okay, there's a 35-year-old man with developmental disabilities and his caretaker or his guardian just passed away and now he's in an apartment by himself, like who does he call? So these really difficult cases, we try our best to work on, but we would really love to see if there's a model that we could replicate here in the city that would provide case management. Because the system of disability organizations and services is fragmented. There are state agencies, there are nonprofits, and it's really hard to figure out where to send someone, especially if they can't do it on their own. So we're excited about this capstone project, and we will keep you up to date on what research we find. Next slide. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what Wes said about emergency planning. I know that emergency planning is in the news a lot. Disasters are in the news, especially with climate change. We're seeing so many more severe storms, hurricanes, rain events, earthquakes. We even have tornadoes now in Massachusetts, things that we never had before. So we know that emergency planning is key. But it is difficult to hear like broad strokes of people say like people with disabilities aren't considered, because in all the work we do, people with disabilities are absolutely considered. So we work regularly with the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. We work on their evacuation plans, their alerts, decontamination plans. We work with them very regularly to assure that disability access is built in, so that there's a commitment to provide accessible transportation. We ensure that they do have accessible vehicles. We work on communication for people who are blind and deaf. We work on training and training protocols that they can roll out to staff who are manning emergency shelters. So we really got kind of a trial run when COVID hit, and we did see definitely gaps where people with disabilities were left behind. So I think we learned a lot from that, but I do just want to reassure the board that we absolutely consider people with disabilities in planning and training for emergency evacuations, emergency preparedness, and I know the state does as well. And I know that the board had written a letter back during COVID about vaccine access. And so I think that was something that the state heard, because since then I've seen more attention paid to people with disabilities when it comes to things like that. But definitely agree with you that it's an important issue. Just want to assure the board that we do work on this issue constantly. And I don't know if you remember, but Colleen invited people to the CERT program, the Community Response. These are a group of volunteers who are trained to respond to their neighborhood when there are small scale emergencies. So we had a cohort of nearly 50 residents with disabilities who graduated earlier this year. And we're really thrilled to have that many people respond and be trained. And then they can be deployed when there are small scale events, like if there were a power outage and maybe leaflets needed to be given out, things like that. So if you want more information on that, they do those trainings every year. So we'll be happy to provide more information. And we'll do the next slide. As everyone knows, the election is next week. As Wes mentioned, the drop boxes go through tomorrow and early voting ends tomorrow. We can vote in person next Tuesday, November 5th. All polling locations are accessible to voters with disabilities, and they also have auto-mark machines. Accessible electronic voting and absentee voting are past deadline for this year, but you can always keep them in mind for next year. You can find out where your what council races your district is in, and look for your polling place at the maps on the links included here. One thing I did want to bring up is we have so far with early voting heard of a few accessibility barriers. So I really want to implore that if you hear of any barriers, if you experience any barriers with early voting, with the electronic process, or in person next Tuesday, please let our office know, let the city know. You should send it to 311 and email us at disability@boston.gov, because we want to make those improvements. We say, very proudly that all locations are accessible, but if they're not, we don't want to say that, so we want to be able to make these improvements. So please let us know if you experience any barriers or know of anyone who did experience barriers. And I know that BCIL and the Disability Law Center will be doing a survey of 15 polling sites to ask to get a list of questions about accessibility. So we will have more information on that, but please keep in touch with us. We would really like to hear that information. Next slide. And as I've been saying, since you talked about goals that you want to accomplish as a board, I really want to be the one who can help provide opportunities for engagement. So there are two things coming up that I wanted to open up to board members. The first one is the Office of Participatory Budgeting. I know we've talked about this process many times, but the city holds off a portion of its budget to let the public decide what it will be spent on. So they've been collecting ideas all year, including holding 3 visioning forums this past month. Specific proposals will be developed this year, and voting on the final projects will begin in January. So the Participatory Budgeting External Oversight Board will be holding a public hearing on Thursday, November 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. And they will be presenting the 15 draft proposals for the budget process that will be voted on in January. So if you're interested in hearing what the proposals are, it's too late to give input on them, but it's very interesting to see where the public wants to direct this money. So we welcome you all to attend. And then the second thing is very exciting. It's the planning department has just finished a draft report on designing a diverse Boston. So they would love to have the public read the report and share feedback. It's a report about design values and principles known as design vision. And it's really about what kind of design communities want to make their neighborhoods feel like home. And we know that the mayor's goal is to make Boston a home for everyone. So we would love it if you take a look at the design vision and the draft report. There's some really cool interactive pictures and images and things like that. And it definitely talks about diversity in Boston and what we want to see and what we want to give people who live in the neighborhoods. There's a public meeting online on Wednesday, November 13th, and you can submit comments at the project page or by emailing designvision@boston.gov. And I believe that is it from, one more slide. October wraps up National Disability Employment Awareness Month. As you all know, every year we do a webinar on pathways to employment for City of Boston jobs. So this year we did that, we did have that webinar, but we added 3 additional ones. And really they are based on our cabinet's goal of financial empowerment and economic mobility for people with disabilities. So our last webinar, we had 4 webinars, and the last one is actually wrapping up tonight. And they are all available. Actually, I didn't put the links in yet, but I'll do that before we send the slide deck out. The first one was on pathways to employment with the City of Boston, where we had human resources representatives from 4 different hiring agencies, Boston Public Health Commission, Boston Public Schools, Boston Housing Authority, and City of Boston. They all came and talked about their hiring portals, requirements for working for their agencies, and talked about open jobs. Our next webinar was on saving, banking, credit, and financial incentives for Boston residents with disabilities, things like tax credits and tax prep, savings accounts, even if you're on disability benefits, so that you can try to save and get ahead. Our webinar last week was on finding affordable, available, and accessible housing. And then tonight's webinar is for employees to know their rights. And this is general for everybody, but particularly focusing on workers with disabilities. And all of these webinars were recorded, so they'll be available on YouTube, and we'll put in the links before we send out the slide deck. And then actually wrapping off our NDEAM month events is our first in-person hire event. So we're hosting an interview day next Monday in City Hall, where we have roughly 20 participants that have been vetted through the Mass Ability, Mass Commission for the Blind, JVS, and Work Inc. to apply for jobs, City of Boston jobs. They are all people who are disabled residents of Boston who are ready to go to work and looking for jobs. So any jobs that they met the minimum qualifications for, we asked them to apply for those jobs. And then from Human Resources, we got a list of certain jobs where hiring managers were willing to do an interview on the spot for the jobs that they had posted. So we have so far scheduled, I think, between 15 and 20 participants to get a first round interview on Monday. So we're really excited about this because we think it eliminates a big barrier to employment for people with disabilities, and that is getting a first round interview. You don't know, should you disclose your disability, if it's visible or if it's not visible? Will we be discriminated against? Will there be any stigma? So this way you don't have to worry about any of those barriers. You can just come and present yourself and talk about your skills and your qualifications. And we think it's a big step for the City of Boston, and we're excited to make it happen. And that is it for my report. So now I am going to turn it over to Dan Rosengard, unless we want to take questions first.
I was going to say Commissioner Carl has a question.
Okay, yep, go ahead, Carl.
No, it's more of a, just an announcement to go along with the commissioner, talk about accessible voting. On WBUR, there was both an article on the website and in the radio about the aging of the auto mark machines and how we're going to have to find new solutions if we want to continue to make voting accessible. I can put the link to the WBUR article in the chat if people are interested. I just wanted to make people aware that that's something that the disability community is working with, hopefully the Secretary of State's office and Rev Up on.
Thank you, Carl. And I think it also speaks to what Wes was mentioning with emergency preparedness. You know, we can do so much work behind the scenes. We do planning, we work on policies, we work on like products and services. And then if they fail when they're in place, it just looks like nobody did anything and nobody considered anybody. So it is super important that you let us know, and anything specific. And also like the bus stops, like we mentioned before, if there is a bus stop that is really troublesome, please let us know so we can pay attention to it. So thank you for raising that, Carl. And I see Juan Carlos has a question.
Yes, Commissioner Marcos, thank you so much for sharing all this information again. I just want to comment about seminars, the web seminars. Those are great. I missed this year to participate on those. I would be interested to know, did you mention that those are uploaded later on a YouTube platform? Because I guess what I'm trying to ask ultimately is that if those seminars will be available in other languages, captioned in other languages afterwards. So if it's on YouTube, probably there is no problem because that can be used on the translate options. You can use them, but otherwise, I think those would be like a super potent informational series for other folks as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have a YouTube channel and all our videos go on that. So you can definitely use the Google Translate function on those.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, Wes, do we want to go? Okay, let's go to Dan, and then we'll come back and ask if people have more questions on my report. They can do that as well. So I'm going to turn over to Dan Rosengard, who's the Director of Transportation for Boston Public Schools, for his quarterly update to the board.
Hi, everyone.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name's Dan Rosengard, the Executive Director of Transportation for Boston Public Schools. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm a white male from West Roxbury with light brown hair, wearing a striped red button-down shirt, and sitting in my office here at the Bowling Building in Roxbury. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all again. I've come a few times before to give updates on Boston Public Schools transportation and the work we're doing. And just really appreciate the opportunity to be back and to have some of the commissioners' time tonight to talk to you all. Our mission at Boston Public Schools Transportation is to provide safe, reliable, and on-time transportation for all Boston students. Right now, we transport 22,700 students on a daily basis, and that includes about 6,840 students with disabilities who receive door-to-door transportation. That means bus service that picks them up and drops them off at their home address. And we also provide transportation for 2,633 students who receive a bus monitor, which is an additional adult on the bus to support that student based on their individual needs. As the commissioner mentioned, I've a couple times over the last few years come to share updates on our bus driver and bus monitor staffing, as well as our on-time performance. And I'm gonna do the same tonight. Before I do, I just wanted to give a little bit of context. Many of you may be aware, but for those who aren't, we implemented an entirely new technology system across our operation this year. and that it's called the Zoom system. Prior to this, transportation had been done one way in Boston for basically for the last half century, the last 50 years, where drivers were using paper printouts of their routes every day, and we had pushed as far as we could in terms of making improvements and tightening up operations with this system. But we knew that to really get past kind of the plateau that we've been at the last few years, stuck at about 90% of buses arriving on time, to get past that, and also to make sure that we're providing improved safety and transparency, for families and for schools and students, that we needed to modernize our system. And so we implemented this year the Zoom technology system, which is a fully integrated system across our operation. Some of the highlights is it provides GPS navigation tablets on board buses for bus drivers, and it provides a new mobile app for families to track their bus, which they could do before using our old system. But what's new in Zoom is they can now, in addition to just seeing where the bus is on the map, receive ETAs, receive automated push notifications when the bus is delayed, and get notifications when the bus is arriving to their stop, when their student is picked up, and when their student is confirmed as dropped off. And so that was really important to provide that additional transparency, and additional safety measures for students. So that was something very, very new that we were doing this year. I think we knew that doing something this new would come with some growing pains, and so I just wanted to share that context. And with that, I'm going to share my screen and show some slides here. So tell me, are you seeing a slide? Yes. I don't know if someone can give me a thumbs up or a verbal yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So this first slide here is showing our on-time performance, which is the key performance indicator that we use to measure our operation. On-time performance measures the percentage of buses that are arriving at school prior to the morning bell in the morning, and in the afternoon it's similar but just slightly different. It measures the percentage of buses that arrive at school prior to their scheduled departure time, which is 10 minutes after the PM dismissal bell. And what you'll see here is the blue line for AM and PM is showing our on-time performance week by week for the first 9 weeks of the school year last year, and the red line on each graph is showing the on-time performance week by week this year. And what you can see is there was a significant decline at the start of this school year in our on-time performance. For the first 2 days of the school year, our on-time performance this year in the morning was 47%, which was significant decrease from the first 2 days last year, which was 73%. We've made some rapid improvements. In September, our on-time performance in the morning increased to 71%, but that was still 7 percentage points below September last year. But what we've been really encouraged by is, in October, we're now seeing higher on-time performance in the morning this October than we saw last year in October. And so, we have obviously 1 day left in October, but through today, our October on-time performance is 90% compared to 88% last October. And so I think, while certainly we, did not intend to, or anticipate quite such a decline at the start of this school year, I think, what we're seeing, the trend that we're seeing is in line with what we were expecting, which is, being able to recover quickly and get to a point where we, fully expect to be able to continue to improve beyond what we were able to do in prior years. And we've been improving not quite as rapidly in the afternoons, But we're just now at the end of October, kind of getting to a point where we're on par with afternoon on-time performance compared to last year. So that's our primary metric. Wanted to also talk briefly about our bus driver and bus monitor staffing. So we started this school year fully staffed with bus drivers and bus monitors, both for the first time since prior to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We started this school year with 744 bus drivers and 759 bus monitors. And what we've seen is, we were also, more or less fully staffed with bus drivers last year. So, we've seen very low numbers of uncovered trips with bus drivers, both last year and this year. We've seen an ever so slight uptick this year, which has really been driven not by bus driver availability, but actually by bus availability as our bus fleet continues to age. And so we've really doubled down on expanding our maintenance capacity over the last month to help address some of the issues that we saw in September there. And then with bus monitors, what we've seen is we've more than halved the number of students who are required but missing a bus monitor on their bus compared to last school year. And so in the mornings, right now we're averaging 63 students not having their morning bus monitor this year so far, compared to 165 students in the morning for the same time period last year. And in the afternoon, 104 students compared to 215 last year not having their morning bus monitor. And again, that is out of about 2,633 total students who require a bus monitor based on their individualized education plan or their 504 plan. And then just the last slide I have, because I don't want to take too much time and want to leave any time for questions, is just to summarize some of the key challenges that we saw at the start of this school year. The biggest one, as I talked about, was this adjustment period associated with the rollout of the new Zoom technology. Some additional factors that we saw this year, we also saw a significant number of student level changes. That could be enrollment changes, new to the district or transferring schools. Could also be a new IEP or a change of address, any type of change that requires a new bus assignment. We saw a significant increase in the number of those changes in August and September this year, which required us to change the bus routes from what they were set for when the bus drivers got them and did their dry runs for the start of school to what they actually ran on the first day of school. We saw that more than 2/3 of routes changed from when the routes initially locked, and drivers did their dry runs to what they had for the first day of school. And this was more than double the number of changes we saw, for the first day of school last year. And so this, also contributed to some of that initial challenge that we saw that took some time to work through and get the routes stabilized. And then we've also seen some significant traffic impacts, from changing traffic patterns in the city, and I think most acutely from the temporary shutdown of, a portion of the red line in September, and then a portion of the orange line for most of October. That being said, I think, where we're really focusing our time and prioritization for, continuing to improve on-time performance is in a few different areas. The first one is, as one of the benefits of this new system that we have a lot of newly available data that allows us to, update our bus schedules in a more dynamic manner than we were able to before, to make sure that scheduled times match actual travel times that we're seeing on the road. We're able to identify routes that have low or no riders, based on newly available ridership data, so that we can use that to improve our overall efficiency. We're getting additional data that's helping us identify and collaborate with schools who we're getting, longer bus loading times to help them improve their processes. And then I'm not sure if Matt and Lee are still on, but we've been, had really good collaboration with the Streets Cabinet and the Boston Transportation Department. And they've been, really great in supporting us to help improve school bus operations by thinking about how can we make it easier for school buses to get around the city. and then finally, internally, we're really, really laser focused on how do we improve our yard operations to make sure that buses are getting out of the yard on time in the morning, so that they're on time for their first trip, and then making where there's challenges within the bus schedule that might make a bus late, for its second or third trip of the day, looking at where can we make routing adjustments for some of those consistently late buses to help the bus run more on time. So that's where we're focused right now. Like I said, I think it was definitely a very challenging start to the school year, and I know a lot of students and families were negatively impacted by that, and that's something that we take incredibly seriously, and are really, really urgently thinking about how do we continue to improve. And I think this this new technology system that we've put in place this year, while it has certainly come with an adjustment period, I feel very optimistic about how it's going to help us to improve both safety of our buses and the efficiency and timeliness of our buses over the medium and longer term. And I think we're starting to see that right now. But hope that was helpful, and definitely happy to open it up for any questions anyone has.
Great, Wes here. All right, so I think Charlie had a hand up for a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. If I may, before I get to my question, Dan, I just wanted to just make a comment on the commissioner's report when she was giving the summary of Civic Engagement Day in the morning. I just wanted to say that when I did participate, this is my second year, and I was amazed at how many students and young adults attend. But this year, I stayed for the whole event and came earlier and actually sat down with some of the presentations. The commissioner just wanted to say that the amount of how the presenters engaged was great, and the presentations were very educational. So they were very focused on voter registration and people understanding their rights for that. And then they made sure that people took information with them. So there wasn't a pressure to sign up to vote that day or anything like that. They really explained what each individual could do, and also some of the laws and regulations for which that they can look into. So I just want to say it was a great day. And then all the other presenters that came from City Hall, nobody came unprepared, I guess, or just ad hoc. They definitely were very well prepared. So I really appreciate that. And then also all the caregivers and the educators that came, not only from Boston Public Schools, but I got to speak to a lot of them, and they're so very dedicated and bringing all the students, that it was very great to hear everyone's stories and their passion. And collectively, all the Boston Public Schools educators that came represented a program in BPS called STRIVE, and I know that it's an acronym that it's not off the tip of my tongue, but I think there's a reason why it's an acronym. It's pretty long thing, but they've told me, and I've also followed up with some of the parents, how supportive that the commission and the commissioner has been over the years, and just wanted to thank you for that, because there is ongoing work and that is going on for budgeting and all of these things, that they're trying to have more advocacy for the young adults and students that are going through transition, and also for independent living afterwards. And I know that's something that is, including for myself as a parent, is there's a lot of anxiety towards that, so those periods. So it was great that on Civic Engagement Day that you have that, but then you also have continued support, not just for that day, but for the programming afterwards. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that Joe from Achilles, he came as well as to represent the organization, and a few others. And I will say too that the Boston City Hall staff really looks forward to the event every year. And Marsha Fitzpatrick from BPS, she told us that a lot of the students and faculty and staff from BPS also look forward to it every year. Some of them have come multiple years, and some of them were too young to vote when they first came, and then they were able to register at another year they attended. So it is a really valuable event that they look forward to. So thank you for that.
And if I may ask my question now for Dan, I appreciate you coming, and I know this is challenging because on other presentations, like when I go through the Special Education Parent Advisory Council meeting, you give the presentations, and there's a lot of questions. So you have a very challenging position. I do appreciate how much you're actually engaging and coming and giving a very consistent message and the metrics. I guess what I want to ask specifically as we drive in from this commission, we kind of have been asking, but also gearing towards, hey, specifically, whether it be disaggregated data, but I just wanted to ask you specifically because we focus on the students with disabilities and some of the metric that you're showing. What are now that you have an app that's collecting data, but then also I think you've been in this role now for 3 years, so you're hearing and seeing, you're getting a lot of feedback and engaging with a lot of parents, and even on the task force, a lot of the time that you're putting in on that transportation task force. I mean, what are you seeing as the challenges, both on a qualitative data that's coming in, but then also anecdotally, specifically that you're hearing and seeing for the students with disabilities when it comes to specifically for the yellow bus transportation? What are you able to key in on some of those challenges that you're working on, or anything that needs to be, I guess, addressed, or anything that we can do to help on those?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I really appreciate first the opportunity to engage in these different settings, and Charlie, all of your engagement. I know we've spoken in a number of different settings over the last couple of years. I think the most consistent message that we hear from families of students with disabilities around riding the school bus is how can we do a better job training our bus monitors to support those students? We have such a wide range of students and individualized needs on the school bus, and it is, I think, we provide all bus monitors with with training across many different areas, but I think where we really continue to work to improve and think about how can we do this better is how do we make that connection with the bus monitor who doesn't work in the school with the specific students that they are serving and supporting on the bus, and helping them understand what is this student need on the bus. Is it because is it a medical condition that the student needs a bus monitor for, or is it the student has autism, or is it the student needs behavioral support? Like, there's such a wide range, and the support that is required based on each student can be very, very different, and helping get the information into the hands of the bus monitors and giving them the connection with the student and with the school so that they can really be well positioned to support the students on the bus. I think that is consistently the number one thing that we hear from families and schools around how we can better support students with disabilities.
Okay, Wes here. All right, any other questions or comments for Dan? Or related to the commissioner's report? Anything else? All right, not hearing anything. Okay, well, thank you so much, Commissioner and Dan, for your time. I think we'll go ahead with the agenda now. We'll move on to the next line of business. Let's see. I think we're moving on now to announcements. Did anyone have any announcements to make today that would like to share? I'm not hearing anything. Oh, I guess we can move on to old business.
Okay, so in terms of old business, We had discussed board goal setting action steps. Bear with me just one second, I'm gonna pull up some documentation. So per the email that was sent out, the executive board had asked everyone to review the survey results document and come tonight prepared to discuss. And I wanted to review the top 5 goals that we had voted on. The first was broader engagement with communities of different cultural and language backgrounds of people with disabilities. The second one was continued discussion of community living, housing, and emergency preparedness as a regular meeting item. The third was mental health and physical health. The fourth item was attempt to impact all or as many as possible of the 75 to 80,000 disabled residents of the city of Boston. And the fifth was to become more proactive rather than simply being the receptors of information. So those were the top 5 goals that we had voted on in the survey. The other things that we had asked the board members to be prepared to do was to provide some specific action steps that we could take in order to make progress towards those 5 goals. For example, the goal of becoming more proactive rather than simply being the receptors of information. The executive committee had discussed adding a section to report out, a section of the agenda to report out about what presentations they're considering. The E-Board had a meeting and we would talk about having a discussion of the announcements, also the announcements portion of the agenda to be more explicitly board member reports from their own communities. I just saw a response in the chat from one board member, so I'll just look at that very quickly. And Richard had wanted to share his thoughts about the goals. He said, related to the goal setting, he said, the commission has not had a business plan, so I would recommend that we propose one goal for this year and then see how it goes. He says additionally in his comment that he would suggest that that goal be a general one. So for example, do our best to improve the lives of the residents with disabilities in the city of Boston, something general to that effect. And then he suggested further that I, as board chair, appoint a small committee of no more than 3 members to discuss to discuss 5 items that would help to further the work of that one particular goal we had chosen for the year. So that was Richard's suggestion in the chat. Are there any other thoughts about or comments about goal setting for our work together? Charlie, go ahead.
Hello. I actually went through the votes, and I appreciate how you distilled it, from the executive meeting and reading what Richard stated. I kind of put some thought through this, and a lot of those goals, because I try to categorize them, right? Because there's so many, but a lot of them crossed over, and I think you guys during the executive meeting kind of fleshed this out. That it's to me, there's like the goals that kind of melded together was, fell under like more community engagement and representation, meaning what are we hearing, right, from who we're supposed to be representing, and then sharing that out. Like today, and maybe just to try to tie some of this in, when we listened to the MBTA report, the bus stop report, it was great to hear from Juan Carlos and also Tara that the comment of their experience in ridership and cultural shifts and all of those types of things, right? Versus just infrastructure changes. because I think for me, there was a direct connection as I advocate and talk about transportation for the students with disabilities. I think the qualitative thing that Mr. Rosengard talked about was the actual workers that do the transportation or the buses. How do they be more educated on, like, culturally for engagement, but also to understand from the perspective of that rider, right? What are they? How can it be more? I don't know if the word inclusive is appropriate, but how can they have the same ridership experience or almost a customer satisfaction experience as the other riders, right? That or the majority of those riders. And I think I agree with what you were saying, but I think it's, for me, if there was that we were to channel it from Richard says into one goal, I think it is more of being that proactive or more community engagement, right? The people that, or the communities or wherever our passions represent, that we share more or bring more and share that at the meeting. So I think your idea of if people give presentations, right, or if they're supposed to speak to something specific, I think I like that pathway, because it helps me in these meetings to hear the perspective from others. So when we do have a very good participation from other members and they're giving their perspective, and that allows me to learn more. But then again, I think I said this on the last meeting, it helps me better communicate to not only this commission, but to others to help with advocacy.
This is Wes. Thank you so much, Charlie. I appreciate that. Are there any other comments or concerns from other board members before I call on the commissioner? Okay, Commissioner McCosh, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, so Charlie, I think you're right that there is a lot of, excuse me, there's a lot of crossover in the work and the goals. One thing that occurred to me when we were hearing from Matt about the bus stop position is that the draft report for diverse Boston planning is a great place to give feedback for things like that. The bus stops that Juan Carlos and Tara mentioned, things like really being included in the neighborhood and making sure that those things are thought of, people with disabilities are thought of. So I think it's a really great idea to give input. And if this board took the link that was in my report and shared it with all your networks, especially your disability network, so people with a disability lens, that would be so much input to the design vision from people with disabilities. And I think that plays into Richard's comment about setting a goal of helping improve the lives of people with disabilities. We really want to do it in a systemic way. And this is how we do it, through policy planning. And that's where you can have a real impact. And I know Richard has talked a few times about a business plan, but really all these things are laid out in the enabling legislation and summarized in the bylaws. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do, is try to improve the lives of people with disabilities through actions like this. So I really think that the opportunities that I'm sending your way are will have a direct impact on city policies. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, this is a chance to give a disability perspective directly to the city. So I really hope that you'll take advantage of some of the things that I've sent you. And I think you're right on track, Charlie, and also Richard.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I wanted to add also another part in terms of these announcemements. I think in terms of community relations, community engagement, and making sure that people have information, that means that the members can also share their input, their concerns. Again, what other folks are saying about yes, honey, I see you. Other folks are saying about, sorry, my daughter just wanted something, there she goes. Okay, about what they're hearing in the local community where they live and work as well. Sorry, that was very distracting. Let me get back to what I was thinking about. Are there other comments, other thoughts from board members with regard to the goal setting for our work together? Okay, so I guess we could talk about setting up that smaller committee that Richard had mentioned. So we can continue this effort to choose one goal and then discuss that one goal and its pieces at the next meeting. What do folks think about that? Okay, so I see Olivia nodding. Yet, Olivia, did you want to say something? I see, Charlie, yep, oh, excuse me, Olivia, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And if we need a motion, I'll make one.
This is Andrea. As a point of order, we don't need a vote to make committees. Wes can just appoint folks.
Awesome.
Okay.
Hey, Wes, this is,
Let me think about it. Charlie, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, of course.
yeah, I think that was my question on, by looking at the bylaws, but then also on Robert's rules. Andrew, is that correct? Wes can actually, we don't need to make a motion. He can actually create a subcommittee and then appoint folks to that subcommittee to complete this by from the executive committee, correct?
This is Andrea. That is my understanding. The chairperson has duties to appoint subcommittees as needed.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my question. And so just to give feedback, I agree with most of what Richard's saying when it comes to one goal and then drilling that down and then having a subcommittee kind of report back to the executive committee for by the next meeting. I think it's appropriate because I think it's also I think you guys have a lot on your plate, the executive committee, when you're planning the other things and getting other perspectives. Delegating is fine. I guess is really what I'm saying.
This is Wes. Thanks, Charlie, for that comment. I'm certainly not ready to appoint people in this moment, in this meeting. I think I'm going to need to think about this a little bit, and I'll have a conversation with the executive committee as well. I can plan on making a decision in the next week or two, and folks who are appointed will be informed. I think probably that number 3 that Richard mentioned is a good number. Hopefully the committee and their work will be short and sweet. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next old business item that we have. And that is with regard to our bylaws and updating them to match the state standard. I have comments on this as well. I'll just switch screens here. So we had spoken about this last month also. And we're talking about a particular change of language to the City of Boston Disability Commission Advisory Board state standards then. There's 2 words that we're talking about the difference between. The words are may and shall. So our current bylaws for the Disability Commission Advisory Board are under Article 3 in the 2013 version, and it says, the advisory board shall consist of 13 members appointed by the mayor. The majority of members shall consist of people with disabilities. And then one of the members may be a member of the immediate family of a person with a disability. So it's that last statement, one of the members may be a member of an immediate family of a person with a disability, that we had talked about changing, and changing that may to shall. So one member shall be a member of an immediate family of a person with a disability. So I would ask that someone make a motion to make this update to the bylaws.
This is Carl. I make a motion that we accept the change.
Would anyone like to second Carl's motion? Charlie, I see you as second. Okay, so then, if there are no objections, we can adopt the motion to amend the bylaws. Are there any objections? Okay, so hearing no objections, the motion to amend the bylaws is adopted. Thank you. Great. Thanks everyone for that. Going back to our agenda. Now we're on to new business. I had a piece of new business, the Medicaid estate recovery federal requirements. So I discussed this in my chair's report from last month. And the Boston Globe article that I referred to cautioned that MassHealth would most likely comply with federal guidelines on the estate recovery as opposed to state guidelines. And I know that Elizabeth had questioned next steps for the advisory board and what we can do about the estate recovery news and whether we should explore how to push this with the federal government. And I had initially, last month, I had responded saying yes when we considered writing a letter to the US Congress. But I did take some more time to think carefully about it, and I realized that since we want to focus on Massachusetts residents, why don't we instead write a letter to Governor Healy to congratulate her firstly for signing this into state law, and then asking her to take action on next steps to block the federal requirements to state Medicaid. We could perhaps CC the letter to our State Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, as well. So, are there thoughts about this? Commissioner McCosh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I can add a little bit of context to this issue. So I'm a member of the state's PCA Workforce Council, which is a group of 9 Massachusetts residents. Most of us are consumer employers, which means we go through the PCA program that Medicaid pays for. In case people don't know, Medicaid is funded jointly by the federal government and by the state government. So right now, the PCA Workforce Council is working with the MassHealth office to look at ways to keep the PCA program sustainable moving forward. You may all be aware that it seems like the state and probably the country, but definitely the state, is in for some financial difficult times moving forward. Revenue has not been what was projected, or it's definitely not as abundant as it has been in previous years. So we are looking, the PCA Workforce Council is working with Medicaid. We formed a specific work group to look at how we keep the PCA program sustainable. And part of this work group, MassHealth is asking us to think about ways to not cut back on services, or because we wouldn't support that, but think about creative ways where we could like trim around the edges, or whatever we can do to keep the PCA program sustainable. So what we, all I want to do to raise the issue that the budget is definitely going to be an issue. There may be cuts to a lot of things, and this Medicaid estate recovery is going to cost the state money. So I know the governor signed it, but I think we just want to be thoughtful
about writing a letter. Not that you can't write a letter, but let's just be thoughtful about how we frame it, and definitely be thoughtful about any more asks that are going to be made, which would impact the budget. And the PC.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, the Mass Health Work
All right,
Group.
thanks. Oh,
Sorry, yeah, the Mass Health Work Group for the PCA program is open. It's an open meeting law meeting, and they're once a month. So if anyone's really interested in Medicaid, Mass Health budget issues, feel free to join.
okay. Thank you so much, Commissioner McCosh. So I'm understanding that how the budget cuts are working and how that could definitely impact the estate recovery.
More than that,
Oh, that was a question. Sorry about that.
yeah, I was gonna say, more than that, I really just wanna give people a heads up to think carefully about any more asks. And that's what we're doing with the PCA program. We're just thinking really carefully about growth. We've seen it here in the city, you know, the budget issues with the city budget growing at 8% and the revenue not keeping up with that. So the same thing is happening with Mass Health. It's a very expensive program, and they're really trying to contain costs. And I am fully supportive of the estate recovery. It actually will impact me personally and a lot of people I know. So I'm very supportive of it, but let's just, maybe if we do want to talk more in depth about Mass Health, we can have a small separate subgroup or a meeting, and I can get more information for everybody.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for that. We can plan that out. So any other thoughts about the estate recovery? Okay, hearing none. I had a follow-up discussion. I'll have a follow-up discussion with you, Commissioner McCosh, after this regarding this topic, because I'm seeing how we can see about how we can maybe have a balanced approach on it if we think about it a little bit more about possible letter in the future. All right, moving on. Yes, Colleen, go ahead.
Charlie.
Or Charlie, excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing what the commissioner is saying and trying to gather, and I guess on a higher level, I think it is important, and if the executive committee or the commissioner can help on some of the education, because it is true that everywhere, right, when it comes to revenue and expenses, we're coming at a real inflection point here for budgeting. And I think historically we've seen a lot of the social services and adjustments come after services that specifically affect our community. And it would be helpful if we could get some presenters to talk about that, so we don't, I guess, I think what you were kind of warning, Commissioner, was to advocate for something that could take away from something else, right, within the community. So you're not, because this is all in that, you know, when we talk about the sum game, it's going to be very difficult. So if there is something at a higher level versus just very pointed to these two topics, that we can learn about how, you know, what's going on, and if there are any services that are slated to be, I guess, prioritized to be debudgeted, or, you know, funding to be lowered, because I think that a lot of these services do affect, you know, my household directly, and so it's very difficult to understand how all the different levers work.
I can get together some potential presenters and send it to the executive committee.
Okay. Sure, that sounds great. That's a great plan. Thank you so much. I think that we'll all really benefit from that. All right, let's see here. Moving on the agenda to, I'm just looking at the agenda, excuse me. Now it's time for public input.
This is Andrea with the commission staff. Put this note in the chat, but for public input, please use the raise hand function or indicate in the chat if you have a question or comment. Once you're recognized by the chair, we can either send you a request to unmute if you wish to voice your question, or pin your video if you wish to sign your question. Public input is limited to 2 minutes per speaker.
Thank you so much. All right, Elizabeth, I see your hand raised. Well, before we go ahead and open it up for public input, I guess Elizabeth wanted to have a comment first.
Elizabeth, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just, for the category of new business, which I don't know if I missed that, but if from old business, we went to new business and I wasn't aware, but that's what this would be included under. This actually is old business, but it's quite old, that I wanted to revisit the issue of reevaluating the City Hall Plaza. But we plan to do that a year after it was completed, and last November that didn't work out. And to my knowledge, it hasn't happened since. I think there was an attempt to see if there were some people to do a walk around, so to speak, to examine the bricks. I originally envisioned it as going over more aspects of the plaza, of what was the new design, which has many positives and has greatly improved the use of that space for people with disabilities. But were there any tweaks or further adjustments? But I just wanted to bring that back up as a topic for a future meeting or follow-up.
Can I respond to that, Wes?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, just to say that you are correct, Elizabeth. We had scheduled it for last year, but then we realized we scheduled it for like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was after daylight savings, so it was going to be pitch black. So we didn't get to reschedule it for various reasons, but we can definitely do that. The weather's been really mild, so we could look for a time. It's really up to board members. We can always make time in our schedule to have people come in and walk around. There have been some tweaks that we've made for accessibility, like wayfinding, based on some feedback that we got from different residents. So we can either, prepare something for the next board meeting, or we could have staff walk around with like the phone and video it. But we can definitely discuss reviewing it in the next month or so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, let's plan on that. Let's plan on that as soon as possible, really, before the snow gets here, before winter gets here and it starts snowing. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And we'll add it to the agenda definitely for next month. And hopefully we can plan something before then, before the next meeting, before December 11th. All right, so we're going to transition over to back to the agenda. We'll go back to the public input line of business. So anyone have anything for public input?
Wes, this is Andrea. No one has put anything in the chat during the last few minutes of our discussion of the plaza.
Okay.
If Carl, may I make a motion?
Yes. I was waiting for that, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, who'd like to second? Carl's motion?
This is Paul, I second the motion.
Yes, and I see Paulette. Okay, yes. Okay. Any objections? All right.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, this meeting has been adjourned at 7:26. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.